Why did soldiers wear bright and colorful uniforms? Modern soldiers try to avoid being seen at all costs. In forests, they wear green camouflage. In deserts, they wear sand-colored uniforms. In cities, their uniforms use muted colors that blend into concrete and buildings. But just 100 years ago, soldiers did exactly the opposite. French soldiers wore bright blue uniforms. British soldiers marched into battle wearing vivid red coats. Austrian troops were dressed in white. Their uniforms were decorated with gold embroidery, large epaulets, and tall hats topped with colorful feathers. It almost looks as if they wanted the enemy to see them. So why did they do it? Was it simply because camouflage hadn't been invented yet? The real answer lies in how people of that era understood warfare and what it meant to be a soldier. In 18th and early 19th century Europe, a soldier was much more than someone who carried a weapon. He represented his nation. Honor, courage, discipline, and loyalty were considered the defining qualities of a good soldier. Many officers came from noble families, and the ideal image of war was very different from what we think of today. Rather than hiding and fighting individually, disciplined armies were expected to stand together, maintain their formations, and face the enemy with courage. Military uniforms were not just practical clothing. They were symbols of honor. However, that alone doesn't fully explain why the uniforms were so bright. They also served an important purpose on the battlefield. The primary weapon of the time was the musket. Unlike modern rifles, muskets were not highly accurate at long distances. Battles were usually fought by long lines of soldiers, firing volleys together instead of individuals, taking careful aim from behind cover. On top of that, muskets used black powder. After only a few volleys, the battlefield became covered with thick white smoke. Visibility quickly dropped. Commanders needed to know where their regiments were, which units were advancing, and whether their battle lines were still holding together. Just as importantly, soldiers needed to distinguish friendly troops from the enemy. There were no radios, no drones, and no GPS. In a battlefield filled with smoke and confusion, the color of a uniform was often the fastest way to identify friend from foe. It also helped reduce the risk of friendly fire. In that environment, bright uniforms were surprisingly practical. But another question remains. If the colors were only meant for identification, why add gold embroidery, elaborate epaulets, polished buttons, and colorful feathers? The answer is that military uniforms also represented the strength and prestige of a nation. When a king or emperor reviewed thousands of soldiers marching in perfect formation, the army itself became a demonstration of national power. Today, an aircraft carrier, or a fleet of advanced fighter jets, can symbolize military strength. 200 years ago, that role belonged to the army, and to the uniforms its soldiers proudly wore. The uniforms also inspired the soldiers themselves. Napoleon once famously said, "A soldier will fight long and hard for a bit of colored ribbon." He wasn't talking about money. He was talking about honor. Elite units such as the Imperial Guard wore even more impressive uniforms than ordinary infantry. Simply wearing that uniform told every soldier, "I belong to one of the finest units in the army." In many ways, it served the same purpose that the Green Beret, the Maroon Airborne Beret, or other elite military insignia serve today. But this tradition did not last forever. During the late 19th century, new technology changed warfare completely. Rifled firearms became far more accurate. More importantly, smokeless powder replaced black powder. The advent of smokeless powder also brought significant changes to military uniforms. Soldiers could clearly see one another from much greater distances. Bright uniforms were no longer symbols of confidence. They had become easy targets. Armies quickly replaced their colorful uniforms with khaki, gray, and green camouflage. Yet military pride did not disappear. It simply found new ways to express itself. Instead of colorful combat uniforms, soldiers now display their identity through berets, unit insignia, medals, rank insignia, and ceremonial dress uniforms. The British Guards, for example, still wear their famous red tunics during ceremonial duties. The colorful uniforms disappeared from the battlefield. But the traditions and the pride behind them never disappeared. The history of military uniforms is not simply the story of changing fashion. It is the story of how advances in military technology transformed not only the battlefield, but also the culture, identity, and symbols of the soldiers who fought upon it. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.